which has persuaded me of the importance of small government and individual liberty. They also don't let me out much, because I tend to be sort of one of the behind-the-scenes people in our cases, and I only work in the area of school choice. But as you can see from some of the propaganda that we've brought with I've brought, we do a lot of other things in the area of private property, free speech, and economic liberty. Basically, really weird cases involving things like eminent domain. The Kelo case at the Supreme Court, that was us. Zellman was us in the school choice area, the first case to hit the Supreme Court. And I'd like to sort of explain how we come at the issue of school choice. Now, I'm sure Professor Tractenberg thinks this is basically a bunch of hooey, but I'm hoping that the fact is that 14 years enforcing federal civil rights laws reflects some sort of honest commitment to the rights of minorities and the poor, because that's why we think school choice is so important. And we think it explains, actually, much of his conundrum about the public schools. I'm changing my text here a little bit because I can. And for us, the seminal case and the most important case in that underlies our school choice pillar of our litigation practice is the case of Pierce versus Society of Sisters in 1925, when the advocates for the public schools passed an initiative in the state of Oregon in 1922 to require all students to attend the public schools, and would have put all the private schools out of business and not permitted anyone to send their children to private schools at all. Some people thought that was a clear infringement on the personal liberty that Americans should enjoy, and two of the schools sued and won at the Supreme Court, which issued one of its pro-parent decisions, saying that the child is not the mere creature of the state, but that the parents have the right and high responsibility to oversee the education of their children, and that includes the right to choose private education for their kids. From our point of view, a school choice program is at least partially successful if even one low-income person is empowered to choose a private school, because they don't currently have that right. Now, education is neither free in the United States, in the sense of free in terms of cost, nor is it free in terms of you get to choose whether to educate your kid. It's compulsory. In the United States, we require children to attend school typically through age 17, with the power of the state compelling them to go, and the power of the state compelling the taxpayers to support the public schools in which most of them will be educated. Now, you and I, and certainly Professor Tractenberg and I, can exercise two forms of school choice, and we routinely do. We choose where to live, in part because there are good schools there. And if we make a mistake, and in fact there aren't good schools there, we've got the wherewithal to put our kids in private schools. I do that as a matter of principle, even though I live in a very good school district with good public schools. But low-income urban families typically do not have those sorts of resources that we have. They can neither move to a district with good schools, and they can not afford to put their kids into private schools. Therefore, the state is basically forcing them to attend school, and they are captives of whatever school the state sees fit to give them, or the local district. Here in New Jersey, you have gone as far as you can in terms of equalizing and even compensating for funding or extra needs for low-income students in urban areas. But generally in the United States, public education now it costs 4 times what it did in 1980, controlling for inflation. And in the Abbott districts, I suspect it's far higher. In fact, if Chris Christie were here listening, he'd probably thank Professor Tractenberg for keeping the Republican Party of New Jersey alive, because your property taxes are what are supporting the Abbott decision and redistributing income from wealthy districts to poor districts to the extent that you have considerable opposition to property tax rates now, which typically means people vote Republican. So private school choice is basically an illusion in urban districts, and possibly one of the reasons why public education in urban districts, not just in New Jersey, but certainly in New Jersey, sucks. Public education here, in your urban districts, quite frankly, is still appallingly bad. It's appallingly bad after 40 years of Abbott and Robinson before it. These are the Jarndyce versus Jarndyce of modern jurisprudence. Many of you know Charles Dickens and Cleveland. This case has gone on for 40 years, and in the words of Oklahoma, you've gone about as far as you can go. So what is it that school choice can offer in New Jersey? Well, part of Professor Trachtenberg's conundrum about public opinion is explained by the fact that we all probably came from suburban school districts where the schools aren't bad. In part, they're not bad because we have the wherewithal to lead them. And so our public school districts respond to us very differently than urban school districts respond to urban families, because we can leave. We can leave for a neighboring district with better schools, or we can leave for private schools. And so our schools, not surprisingly, perform better. It's one of the reasons why non-urban schools perform better than urban schools. Urban schools have a captive population and can take their clients for granted. Suburban school districts cannot. Therefore, since there are more suburban districts than there are urban districts, and it's urban, you have a very different sort of public polling if you poll families in urban districts than if you poll statewide, where the urban vote, if you will, is diluted by the suburban people who like their schools. Nobody's saying we're going to take away your public schools. All we're trying to do is provide urban parents and urban families with the same options to opt out, or one of the options to opt out. We can't give them the option to move, but we can give them the option to move their children to private schools. And that's what school choice and urban education is all about. This isn't sort of just, I mean, I'm a lawyer, I'm not a social scientist. I don't even play one on TV. But there was a book in 1990, Markets, Schools, Politics, Markets, and American Schools, by Terry Moe and John Shub, that basically explained why urban districts are different from every other district, and why school choice could have a very beneficial effect if tried in appropriate ways in the urban districts. So school choice tries to change the power relationship by transferring power directly to families and giving them the power to choose private education for their kids, the same way that all of you, whether you exercised it or not, your families probably had it. And that power, whether exercised or not, resulted in your districts treating you and your families differently than people are treated in urban districts. Nevertheless, there is clear evidence that school choice doesn't harm public education and doesn't harm the children whose parents exercise the option. Now, could there be any reason why a rational person might prefer it, since if they both provide similar academic results? Well, consider the Milwaukee program, where the voucher costs about 40% of what's spent on a child in public school. The voucher there is under $7,000. Milwaukee spends about $15,000 per kid who remain in the public schools. It's very similar here. The bill that has been proposed, a corporate scholarship, a corporate tax credit to generate scholarships for low-income students in failing schools, would provide a $6,000 voucher for K through 8 and a $9,000 voucher for high school. That is a fraction of the average $15,000 per capita spent throughout New Jersey, and it is a much smaller fraction of what is spent in avid districts. Now, that bill is aimed at failing schools. Approximately 205 failing schools in New Jersey, 91 of them in 3 avid districts alone, 45 in Newark, 25 in Patterson, 24 in Camden. That's 91 schools in 3 districts alone. And that is if you discount all of the evidence from gold standard studies that indicate that, in fact, school choice provides superior academic performance. This is where every school choice program that has been instituted in the United States is oversubscribed. That means more people want to use the voucher than there are vouchers available. And these gold standard studies compare the families that get the voucher with the families that don't. And many of the studies have shown benefits academically, but one area which is incontestable is that all the studies of them that have studied one particular factor have found substantial superiority for the children taking the vouchers, and that's graduation rate, which is a very important criterion. Since if you don't have if you can't graduate from high school, you are basically shit out of luck in modern America. And the graduation rates in Washington and in Milwaukee, both of which have been studied, are far higher among students taking the vouchers than the rest of the students in those districts. And that includes, it's a comparison of low-income voucher kids versus everyone. And that includes in Milwaukee, for example, students who are ineligible for the vouchers because their income level is too high. So what we have is the ability to educate children better, more cheaply, and ensure that more of them graduate. So from the perspective of can it benefit urban education, I think it's obvious. But in the most important criteria, which is, does it